Dr. Amanda Price brushed the dust off the stone tablet with careful hands. The wind on this dead planet howled through the ruins around her, carrying sand that stung her face through the helmet's visor. She had been digging here for 3 months, and this was the biggest find yet. "Kevin, come look at this," she called to her research partner. Dr. Kevin Liu was 20 feet away, scanning another section of the ancient city with his equipment. Kevin walked over, his boots crunching on the broken stones. "What did you find?" Amanda pointed at the symbols carved deep into the black stone. "These markings are different from everything else we've seen. Look at how deep they cut into the rock. Someone really wanted this message to last." The tablet was as tall as Amanda and twice as wide. The symbols covered every inch of its surface. Some were simple pictures that she could understand. Others were complex patterns that hurt her eyes to look at. "Can you read any of it?" Kevin asked, kneeling down beside her. Amanda nodded slowly. "Some of it. We've seen these basic symbols on other worlds, but these here..." She pointed to a series of jagged marks near the top. "These are new, and they appear over and over again." Kevin pulled out his scanner and ran it over the stone. "The rock is old. Really old. This was carved at least 50,000 years ago, maybe more." Amanda felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold wind. 50,000 years ago, humans were still learning to make fire. But someone had built this city, carved these warnings, and then vanished completely. "Look at this section," she said, moving to the left side of the tablet. The symbols here showed what looked like stars, but with dark shapes moving between them. "I think this is telling a story." Kevin studied the carvings. "Stars going dark?" "No, look closer." Amanda traced the symbols with her finger. "The stars aren't going dark. Something is eating them." They worked in silence for the next hour, taking pictures and measurements. Amanda's translation computer worked slowly, matching the symbols to other languages they had found on dead worlds across the galaxy. "Amanda!" Kevin's voice was tight. "You need to see this." He was standing at the bottom of the tablet, where the symbols were smallest and most complex. His scanner was beeping rapidly. "What is it?" The computer finished the translation of this section. "Look." Amanda read the words that appeared on Kevin's screen. Her blood turned to ice. "They sleep, but they will wake when the stars align again. The devourers come from the deep dark between worlds. They eat everything. Planets, stars, life itself. We tried to fight them. We failed. Others will try. They will fail too. Unless they work together. Unless they prepare. Unless they listen to this warning." Amanda sat down hard on a broken piece of wall. "The devourers?" Kevin nodded. The computer found references to them in 12 other languages from dead worlds. Always the same story. A race that comes from somewhere else. Eats everything, then disappears. How many worlds have we found with these warnings? 47 so far. All dead. All destroyed in the same way. Their stars ripped apart. Their planets turned to dust. Amanda stood up and walked to the edge of the ruins. Below them, the dead city stretched for miles. Once, this had been home to millions of people. Now it was nothing but broken stones and blowing sand. "We need to contact Earth," she said. 2 days later, Captain Jake Morrison was having a bad day. His ship, the ECS Horizon, was supposed to be exploring the outer edges of human space, looking for new worlds to colonize. Instead, he was staring at readings that made no sense. "Lieutenant Foster, run that scan again," he ordered. Lieutenant Maya Foster, his science officer, shook her head. "I've run it 6 times, Captain. The readings are the same every time." Jake looked at the main screen. It showed the galactic core, the bright center of the galaxy, where millions of stars clustered together. But something was wrong with the image. "Those energy readings," Jake said. "They're off the charts." Maya nodded. "Something big is happening in the core, Captain. Really big. The energy output has increased by 300% in the last month." Could it be a natural phenomenon? Stars exploding? Black holes merging? No, sir. The energy pattern is too regular, too organized. This is artificial. Jake felt his stomach drop. Artificial meant intelligence. Intelligence on a scale that could affect the galactic core meant power beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. How big would something have to be to generate this much energy? Maya checked her instruments. At least the size of a solar system, Captain. Maybe bigger. Jake stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he turned to his communications officer. Lieutenant Davis, send a priority message to Earth Command. Tell them we need to speak with Admiral Hawkins immediately. Back on Earth, Admiral Lisa Hawkins was reading the reports from both Dr. Price and Captain Morrison when her aide knocked on her office door. Come in, she called. Ma'am, President Carter is here to see you. President Daniel Carter walked into the office, his face serious. Lisa, I've been reading the reports. Tell me this is some kind of mistake. Admiral Hawkins shook her head. I wish I could, Mr. President. But the evidence is clear. Dr. Price has found warnings about something called the Devourers on dozens of dead worlds. Captain Morrison is detecting massive energy signatures from the galactic core, and our deep space sensors are picking up movement out there. President Carter sat down heavily in the chair across from her desk. Movement? Something big is stirring to life in the galactic core. The patterns match what Dr. Price found in those ancient warnings. How long do we have? Admiral Hawkins pulled up a star chart on her computer, based on the energy readings. And the stories from those ruins, maybe 6 months before they reach the outer rim worlds, a year before they get to the core systems where most of the alien civilizations live. President Carter was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked up at her. We have to warn them. Warn who, sir? Everyone. Every alien government. Every colony. Every ship in space. This threat is bigger than human space or alien space. If these devourers are real, if they're really coming, then every living being in the galaxy is in danger. Admiral Hawkins nodded, slowly. I'll contact our diplomatic corps immediately. But, sir, most of the alien governments barely acknowledge our existence. The Zenthari Empire considers us primitive. The Neptunians think we're children playing with dangerous toys. Why would they listen to us about something like this? President Carter stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the capital city. Millions of people went about their daily lives below, not knowing that their entire species might be facing extinction. Because, he said finally, it's the right thing to do. Whether they listen or not, we have to try. 3 hours later, Admiral Hawkins was coordinating the largest diplomatic effort in human history. Messages were being sent to every known alien government. Ships were being dispatched to carry warnings to remote colonies and trading posts. But even as the warnings went out, deep space sensors were detecting more movement from the galactic core. Whatever was waking up out there was getting stronger. And based on the ancient warnings Dr. Price had found, humanity had very little time to convince a galaxy of skeptics that the impossible was about to become terrifyingly real. Ambassador Helen Rodriguez adjusted her formal diplomatic robes as she waited in the grand throne room of the Zenthari Empire. The ceiling stretched up so high that she could barely see it, covered in gold and precious stones that sparkled in the light from massive crystal chandeliers. Emperor Vex Kalar sat on his throne, which was carved from a single piece of black stone and decorated with the skulls of enemies defeated in battle. The Zenthari ruler was 9 feet tall, with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished metal. His red eyes glowed as he looked down at the small human ambassador. So, his voice boomed through the chamber, the young species from the edge of the galaxy comes to us with warnings of danger. How amusing. Helen took a deep breath and activated her translation device. Your Imperial Majesty, I come with urgent information about a threat to all life in the galaxy. We have discovered evidence of an ancient enemy called the Devourers. The Emperor laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Devourers? What children's stories do you bring to the mighty Zenthari Empire? They are not stories, Your Majesty. We have found ruins on dozens of worlds, all telling the same tale. These beings consume entire star systems. Our deep space sensors show massive movement from the galactic core. Emperor Vex Kalar leaned forward on his throne. Human, the Zenthari Empire has ruled this sector for 10,000 years. We have conquered 100 worlds and defeated every enemy who dared to challenge us. What could possibly threaten us that we have not already destroyed? Helen pulled out a data pad and showed him images from Dr. Price's excavation. These civilizations were more advanced than any of us. They built cities that lasted 50,000 years. But they all fell to the same enemy. The Emperor barely glanced at the images. Dead rocks and old stones prove nothing. The Zenthari do not fear shadows and legends. Your Majesty, please, if we work together, if all the civilizations of the galaxy unite, we might be able to stop them. Unite? The Emperor stood up to his full height. The Zenthari do not unite with anyone. We conquer or we destroy. And we certainly do not take orders from a species that has barely learned to leave its own solar system. Helen tried one more time. The energy readings from the galactic core are increasing every day. Something massive is waking up out there. Then let it come, Emperor Vex Kalar declared. The Zenthari will crush it like we have crushed everything else. Guards, escort this human out of my sight. Two massive Zenthari warriors stepped forward, their armor clanking with each step. Helen had no choice but to leave, her warning unheeded. 3,000 light-years away, Ambassador Dr. Stephen Blake was having similar luck with the Quartz Collective. The crystalline beings lived in vast underwater cities on their ocean world, their bodies made of living crystal that could reshape itself at will. Resonance Prime, the leader of the collective, was a 20-foot-tall structure of blue and green crystal that hummed with harmonic frequencies. When it spoke, its voice was like music, but the words were cold. Dr. Blake of Earth, your data is clearly fabricated. The probability of such an ancient threat existing undetected is negligible. Stephen stood on a platform in the center of the underwater chamber, breathing through an apparatus that let him survive in the alien environment. Schools of fish swam between the crystal structures, creating patterns of light that hurt his eyes. Resonance. Prime, I assure you this data is real. We have independent confirmation from multiple sources. The ruins, the energy readings, the patterns of destruction across dead worlds. It all points to the same conclusion. The crystal being pulsed with different colors as it processed this information. Your species is known for emotional reactions and irrational fears. This appears to be an attempt to create importance for yourselves by inventing a galactic crisis. We're not trying to create importance, Stephen protested. We're trying to save lives. Billions of lives across the galaxy. The Quartz Collective has existed for 50,000 years. We have seen the rise and fall of many species. None have presented a threat that required our concern. Your warnings are dismissed. Other crystal beings around the chamber hummed in agreement, their combined voices creating a harmony that made Stephen's bones ache. At least consider the possibility, he pleaded. Run your own deep space scans. Check the energy readings from the galactic core. We do not waste resources investigating the fantasies of primitive species. This audience is concluded. The platform Stephen stood on began to rise, carrying him up toward the surface and away from the Crystal City. Another warning rejected. Another potential ally lost. Captain Lisa Morgan had better luck with the Eldarian Republic, but only slightly. The Eldarians were peaceful traders who looked almost human, except for their silver skin and 3 eyes. They at least listened to her warnings without laughing. Council Speaker Tal Mindor sat across from her in a simple meeting room aboard the trading station Harmony Point. Unlike the elaborate palaces of other alien races, the Eldarians preferred function over form. Captain Morgan, we have great respect for humanity. Your species shows promise despite your youth. But what you describe sounds like a myth from our ancient past. Lisa leaned forward. Speaker Talmindor, we have evidence. Physical evidence, ruins, energy readings, sensor data. This isn't a myth. Perhaps not, the Eldarian agreed. But even if this threat is real, what could we do? The Eldarian Republic has no military. We are traders and explorers, not warriors. You have influence. Other species listen to you. If the Eldarians publicly supported our warnings, others might take them seriously. Talmindor was quiet for a long moment, his three eyes blinking in sequence. Captain, even if we believed your warnings completely, announcing them publicly would cause panic. Trade routes would be abandoned. Colonies would be evacuated. The galactic economy would collapse. The galactic economy won't matter if everyone is dead. True. But we cannot act on fears and possibilities. Show us proof. Real, undeniable proof that this threat exists. Then we will consider making a public statement. Lisa knew it was the best she was going to get. How much proof would you need? Something dramatic. Something that proves these devourers are not just ancient history, but a present danger. By the time Lisa left the meeting, she knew what Talmindor was really saying. The Eldarians would only act after the devourers had already started attacking. By then, it might be too late. The mechanical forge builders were even worse. Ambassador Carol White met with Constructor Prime Alpha 7 on their factory world, where massive machines built other machines in an endless cycle of production. The forge builder looked like a giant spider made of metal and cables, with dozens of arms that could work on multiple projects at once. It spoke in a flat, emotionless voice through speakers built into its head. Human Ambassador White, your warnings are causing disruption in our manufacturing schedules. Forge builder units are requesting reassignment to defensive positions based on your fear-spreading activities. Carol stood in the middle of the noisy factory floor, surrounded by machines that never stopped working. Constructor Prime were not trying to spread fear. We're trying to prevent a disaster. Disaster projections show 0 probability of threat from alleged ancient enemy. Probability of economic disruption from panic caused by human warnings. 97%. Have you run any scans of the galactic core? Check the energy readings? Factory resources allocated to production, not investigation of human fantasies. If warning activities continue, Forge Builder Collective will consider human presence hostile interference. Carol felt her heart sink. Are you threatening us? Statement of fact. Continued disruption will result in defensive measures. Warning activities will cease immediately. The massive spider-like being turned away from her, its attention already focused on a half-built machine. The interview was over. Only Chief Navigator Zara Wind of the Wanderer clans showed any real interest in the warnings. The nomadic people lived on generation ships that traveled between the stars, never staying in one place for long. Zara Wind was old even by Wanderer standards, her gray hair braided with small pieces of metal from 100 different worlds. Her ship, the Star Dancer, was ancient but well-maintained, covered in symbols from civilizations across the galaxy. Human Ambassador Rodriguez, she said in accented standard, your words match the old songs our people sing around the fire. Songs of the dark, hungry ones who come from the void between stars. Helen felt a spark of hope. You've heard of the Devourers before? Not by that name. We call them the Star Eaters. The stories say they come in great cycles, eating everything, then sleeping until the galaxy grows full of life again. Do your people have any information about how to fight them? Zara Wind shook her head sadly. The old songs say only one thing about fighting the Star Eaters. All must stand together, or all will fall alone. That's exactly what we're trying to do. Unite the galaxy against this threat. And how many have listened to your warnings? Helen's shoulders slumped. None. The major powers all think we're lying or crazy. Zarawind nodded knowingly. The Wanderers have little influence with the great empires. They see us as primitive nomads not worth listening to. But we will spread your warnings among our people, and we will watch the deep spaces for signs of the Star Eater's return. It was something, but Helen knew it wasn't enough. The Wanderer clans were brave and wise, but the Dr. Alex Morgan had not slept in 3 days. As head of Earth's crisis response team, he spent every waking moment tracking the movement of something that should not exist. The screens around his command center showed star charts, energy readings, and data from deep space sensors across human territory. "Sir, we're getting new readings from Sector 7, reported Lieutenant Commander Janet Ross, his deputy. "The energy signatures are off the charts." Alex rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the main display. The galactic core pulsed with unnatural light, waves of energy spreading outward like ripples on a pond. But these ripples could be seen across thousands of light years. "Any visual contact yet?" "Negative, sir. But the energy patterns suggest massive movement. Multiple objects, each one larger than anything we've ever detected." Alex felt cold dread in his stomach. The ancient warnings had been right. The Devourers were not just legends. They were real, and they were awake. "Get me Captain Davis on the Watchdog. I want eyes on whatever is coming out of that core." Captain Ryan Davis had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history. His ship, the ECS Watchdog, was positioned at the edge of the galactic core, farther from Earth than any human had ever traveled. His job was simple: watch for the enemy and report what he saw. "Captain, we're detecting movement," reported his science officer, Lieutenant Paula Kim. Multiple contacts heading outward from the core. Ryan moved to the main screen and felt. His blood turned to ice. The objects were massive, each one the size of a small moon, but they were not natural. The surfaces pulsed with organic patterns, covered in what looked like metal growths and cables. They moved through space like living things, bending and flexing as they traveled. "How many?" he asked quietly. "Sensors show at least 50 in the first wave. But, Captain, there are more behind them. A lot more." Ryan watched as the creatures spread out, heading toward different sectors of the galaxy. Their movement was purposeful, organized. They knew where they were going. "Lieutenant Kim, are you recording this?" "Yes, sir." "Everything." "Good. Keep recording no matter what happens. Earth needs to see this." The first Devourer ship was heading directly toward them. As it got closer, Ryan could see details that made his skin crawl. The hull was not metal or any material he recognized. It looked alive, covered in veins that pulsed with dark energy. Massive tentacles extended from the sides, each one hundreds of miles long. "Captain, it's scanning us," Lieutenant Kim reported, her voice tight with fear. "Any signs of weapons?" "I don't think it considers us a threat, sir. It's treating us like we would treat an insect." The creature passed by their small ship without slowing down. Ryan watched it disappear into the darkness, heading toward the Outer Rim colonies where millions of aliens lived their peaceful lives, unaware of what was. "Coming! Set course for Earth," he ordered. "Maximum speed." "Sir, shouldn't we follow it? See where it's going?" Ryan shook his head. "We know where it's going. It's going to eat everything in its path. Earth needs to know what we're facing." But Ryan was too late. By the time his ship could reach Earth, the first attacks had already begun. The Zenthari colony of Krex Prime was a military outpost on the edge of their empire, home to 2 million soldiers and their families. It was considered one of the most heavily defended worlds in the galaxy, protected by orbital battle stations and energy shields that could stop any known weapon. General Vox Talon was reviewing troop deployments when the alarms began screaming. "General, we have unknown contacts approaching the system," reported his aide, Major Kex Vrith. General Vox Talon activated the main display and saw 3 objects moving toward Krex Prime. They were huge, but the Zenthari had faced large enemies. Before, activate the defense grid. All battle stations to combat readiness. The orbital platforms powered up their weapons, enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. Energy beams lanced out toward the approaching objects, striking them with the force of miniature suns. The beams hit the creatures and simply vanished, absorbed into their living hulls without leaving a mark. General, our weapons are having no effect, Major Kex Vrith reported, his voice cracking with disbelief. Impossible. Increase power to maximum. The defense platforms fired again, pouring everything they had into the advancing creatures. But the Devourers did not even slow down. The first creature reached the outer defense ring and extended its tentacles. Where they touched the battle stations, the metal began to dissolve, not destroyed or melted, but actually consumed, broken, down into base elements that flowed back into the creature's body. All units, fall back to planetary defense positions, General Vox Talon ordered. But it was already too late. The 3 Devourers surrounded Krex Prime and began to feed. Their tentacles touched the surface, and the ground itself started to disappear. Mountains, oceans, cities, everything was being consumed and converted into energy. General Vox Talon's last transmission was heard across Zenthari space. They're eating our world. They're eating everything. May the ancestors forgive us for not listening to the humans. The planet was gone in 6 hours. Where Krex Prime had once orbited, there was nothing but empty space and cosmic dust. Similar attacks were happening throughout the galaxy. The aquatic world of Tidehome, capital of the Neptunian civilization, fell in 4 hours. The crystalline cities of the Quartz Collective shattered when the Devourers introduced chaotic frequencies that turned their greatest strength into fatal weakness. On Earth, Dr. Morgan watched the reports flood in from across the galaxy. Each one told the same story. Worlds that had existed for thousands of years were being consumed in hours. "How many have we lost contact with?" he asked Lieutenant Commander Ross. 47 worlds in the last week. The pattern is always the same. The Devourers arrive, ignore all weapons fire, and consume everything. Planets, moons, even small asteroids. They're strip mining entire solar systems. Alex looked at the galactic map on his screen. Red dots marked the locations of destroyed worlds, and the pattern was clear. The Devourers were spreading outward from the galactic core in all directions, consuming everything in their path. Any survivors? A few. Mostly ships that were in deep space when the attacks began. They're all reporting the same thing. The Devourers are not interested in fighting. They treat other life forms like we would treat bacteria. Not worth noticing unless they get in the way. Alex felt sick. Entire civilizations, billions of sentient beings, reduced to nothing more than food for creatures that saw them as insignificant. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Zenthari Empire," reported Communications Officer Lieutenant Brad Stone. "Put it through." The image that appeared on screen showed Emperor Vex Kalar, but he looked nothing like the proud ruler who had dismissed Earth's warnings. His armor was cracked, his red eyes dim with desperation. "Humans of Earth," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We were wrong. The Devourers are real. They have consumed 12 of our worlds. Our weapons cannot stop them. We request assistance." Alex stared at the screen. This was the same being who had called humans primitive children just months ago. "Emperor, we tried to warn you. We begged you to prepare." "We know. We were fools." "But please, our people are dying. Billions of them. If you have any way to fight these creatures, we will follow your lead." Before Alex could respond, another transmission came through. This one was from Resonance Prime of the Quartz Collective. "Humans, our calculations were incorrect. The threat is real and immediate. 7 of our crystal cities have been consumed. We formally request alliance and assistance." More transmissions followed. The Eldarian Republic, the Forge Builders, even smaller civilizations that had never spoken to humans before. All of them begging for help, offering to follow Earth's leadership if humanity had any plan to stop the Devourers. General Patricia. Wells entered the command center, her face grim. Dr. Morgan, President Carter wants to see you immediately. We have a situation. Alex followed her to the secure conference room where President Carter was meeting with the military leadership. The president looked older than Alex remembered, the weight of galactic responsibility showing on his face. Alex, what's our status? 47 worlds destroyed, Mr. President. The Devourers are spreading in all directions from the galactic core. At their current rate of expansion, they'll reach the outer human colonies in 3 weeks. And the alien governments that ignored our warnings? They're all requesting assistance now. Every major civilization that's still alive is begging us to lead a coalition against the Devourers. President Carter was quiet for a long moment. How many refugees are heading our way? Admiral Hawkins answered from across the table. Millions of ships, sir. Every civilian vessel that could escape the attacked systems is fleeing toward human space. They're looking to us for protection. Can we protect them? Honestly, sir, we don't know. We have no idea if our weapons will work any. Better than theirs did. But the refugees are coming whether we're ready or not. President Carter stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city looked peaceful, but Alex knew that was about to change. Earth was about to become the last hope for billions of beings. Across the galaxy, Mr. President, Alex said quietly, we have a choice to make. We can focus on defending. The emergency session of the Global Defense Council was the most important meeting in human history. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat in the great circular chamber, their faces showing the weight of the decision before them. Fleet. Admiral John Stevens stood at the podium, his uniform pressed and his expression hard. He had served humanity for 30 years, fighting pirates and defending colonies. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. Members of the Council, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. We face a choice that will define our species for generations to come. The alien civilizations that rejected our warnings are now begging for our protection. They offer us their loyalty, their resources, their complete surrender to human leadership. He activated a holographic display showing the galactic situation. Red zones marked areas consumed by the Devourers. Yellow zones showed refugee fleets fleeing toward human space. The blue zones, representing safe territory, were shrinking by the hour. My recommendation is simple. We establish fortress protocols around human space. We protect our own people and our own worlds. We let the aliens face the consequences of their arrogance. Murmurs of agreement came from several representatives. Senator Paul Adams from the North American Federation stood up. Admiral Stevens is right. We cannot risk human lives to save beings who called us primitive. Our first duty is to our own species. But Dr. Sarah Kim, Earth's chief military strategist, stood up from her seat near the front. Honorable representatives, I understand the desire for revenge. But fortress protocols will not work against this enemy. The Devourers consume everything in their path. If we let them eat the rest of the galaxy, they will eventually come for us too, and we will face them alone. She moved to the display controls and changed the image to show projections of Devourer expansion. Look at the numbers. There are hundreds of these creatures, possibly thousands. Each one can consume a planet in hours. If we let them feed on alien worlds unchallenged, they will grow stronger. By the time they reach human space, we will be facing an enemy that has consumed the entire galaxy. Senator Adams crossed his arms. So you suggest we risk everything to save beings who would not do the same for us? I suggest we save them because it saves us. Every world we help defend is one less world feeding the enemy. Every alien ship we protect is another gun pointed at the Devourers. President Carter had been silent through the debate, but now he stood up. The chamber fell quiet as all eyes turned to him. I have read every report, every analysis, every projection our best minds can produce, and they all lead to the same conclusion. He walked to the center of the chamber, looking at each representative in turn. If we fight alone, we lose. The devourers are too many, too powerful, too hungry. Our only chance is to unite every surviving species in the galaxy under a single command structure. Under human command? Asked Representative Maria Santos from the South American Alliance. Yes. Like it or not, we are the only species that saw this coming. We are the only ones who prepared. The aliens made their choice when they ignored our warnings. Now they must live with the consequences of that choice. Senator Adams stood up again. Mr. President, you're asking us to spend human lives and human resources to save beings who hate us. No, Senator. I'm asking us to spend human lives and resources to save the galaxy, including the human part of it. The debate went on for hours. Some representatives argued for pure isolation, protecting only Earth and the human colonies. Others wanted limited assistance, helping only the alien species that had shown friendship to humanity in the past. But President Carter held firm to his position. We save them all, or we save none. There is no middle ground against an enemy. Like this. When the vote finally came, it was close. 53% in favor of full galactic mobilization, 47% opposed. It was enough. Then it's decided, President Carter announced. Humanity goes to war, not just for ourselves, but for every living being in this galaxy. As the representatives filed out of the chamber, Colonel Mike Turner approached the president. Turner was in charge of Earth's military production, and his face showed concern. Mr. President, do you understand what you've just committed us to? We're talking about the largest mobilization in human history. Every factory, every shipyard, every resource on Earth and in the colonies will have to be converted to military production. I understand, Colonel. How long will it take? To build a fleet capable of fighting galaxy-wide? At least 6 months, maybe more. And that's if everything goes perfectly. Dr. Sarah Kim joined them. Colonel Turner is right, Mr. President, but we don't have 6 months. The Devourers will reach the outer colonies in 3 weeks. President Carter nodded grimly. Then we buy time. We hold the line with what we have while we build what we need. The next morning, Colonel Turner stood in the middle of the Mars shipyards, watching the greatest industrial transformation in human history begin. Factories that had been building civilian ships were being retooled for military production. Workers who had been making cars and computers were learning to build weapons and armor. Dr. Rachel Green, Earth's top weapons researcher, walked up beside him. Mike, we need to talk about the new designs. She handed him a data pad showing blueprints for ships unlike anything humanity had ever built. They were larger, more heavily armed, and covered in armor plating that looked almost alien in design. These specs call for weapons we've never built before, Turner said, studying the plans, because conventional weapons won't work. The Devourers absorbed every attack the alien civilizations threw at them. We need something completely different. What are you thinking? Rachel pointed to diagrams showing strange energy weapons built into the ship hulls. Quantum disruptors. They attack matter at the subatomic level, breaking apart the bonds that hold atoms together. If the Devourers can absorb energy, maybe they can't absorb matter that's being torn apart from the inside. Turner whistled softly. That's theoretical. Technology. We've never built anything like that. Then we better learn fast, because if these don't work, nothing will. Across the solar system, similar scenes were playing out. The asteroid belt was being converted into a massive mining operation, pulling raw materials from floating rocks to feed the shipyards. Jupiter's moons were becoming weapons factories, their low gravity perfect for building the massive components needed for the new ships. Captain Eric Johnson walked through the recruitment center in New York, watching young men and women sign up to fight an enemy they had never seen. The lines stretched for blocks, volunteers eager to defend their species and the galaxy. "Sir," said Lieutenant Amy Walsh, his aide, "we're getting more volunteers than we can process. At this rate, we'll have the largest military force in human history within a month." Eric nodded, but his expression was troubled. "How many of them understand what they're signing up for?" "They know it's dangerous, sir." "They know the aliens ignored our warnings and now need our help. But do they know that most of them won't come home? Do they understand that we're asking them to die for beings who called us primitive children?" Lieutenant Walsh was quiet for a moment. "Sir, I think they do, and I think they're signing up anyway because it's the right thing to do." Eric watched a young woman, barely 18 years old, sign her enlistment papers. Her parents stood beside her, proud but frightened. She was volunteering to fight creatures that could eat planets, and she was doing it to save species that had rejected humanity's friendship. "Maybe that's what makes us human," Eric said quietly. "We do the right thing, even when it costs us everything." But not all humans supported the decision. Senator Paul Adams had returned to his home district and was speaking to crowds of angry citizens who opposed the Galactic War. "Why should human children die for alien empires?" he shouted to a cheering crowd in Chicago. "Why should we spend our resources saving beings who would not lift a finger to save us?" The crowd roared its approval. Signs reading "Humans First" and "Let them fight their own war" waved above their heads. "President Carter has committed us to a war we cannot win, for people who are not our friends, against an enemy that may be unstoppable. This is madness." But, even as Adams spoke, news reports were showing the refugee fleets arriving in human space. Millions of alien civilians, their worlds destroyed, their governments collapsed, looking to Earth for salvation. Captain Maria Santos commanded the rescue, ship ECS Mercy, one of dozens of vessels helping coordinate the massive refugee operation. Her ship was designed to carry a crew of 50, but it now held 300 Xanthari, Neptunian, and Eldarian civilians. "Captain," reported her first officer, Lieutenant Dave Wilson, "we're getting distress calls from 17 more refugee ships. They're low on food, water, and fuel." Maria looked at the tactical display showing the flood of ships entering human space. There were thousands of them, carrying millions of beings whose worlds had been consumed by the devourers. "Do we have supplies to help them?" "Not enough, ma'am. We're already stretched beyond our limits." "Then we share what we have. Reduce our own rations if necessary." Lieutenant Wilson hesitated. "Captain, some of these refugees are from species that threatened us when we tried to warn them. The Xanthari actually said they would consider us hostile if we kept spreading our warnings." Maria turned to look at him, her expression serious. "Lieutenant, we engineer Janet Foster stood in the heart of the Mars shipyards, watching the largest construction project in human history take shape around her. The massive facility, stretched for miles in every direction, filled with the sound of welding torches, heavy machinery, and thousands of workers building humanity's war fleet. "Status report on the new designs," she called to her assistant, Dr. Chris Parker. Chris looked up from his data pad, exhaustion clear on his face. Like everyone else, he had been working 18-hour days for the past month. "The first batch of destroyer-class ships will be ready for testing in 3 days. But Janet, I have to tell you, these weapons we're building are completely untested. We're gambling everything on theoretical science." Janet nodded, watching a massive ship take shape on the assembly line. It was twice the size of anything humanity had ever built, covered in armor plating and bristling with weapons that looked alien compared to traditional human designs. "What choice do we have? Conventional weapons failed completely against the Devourers. If quantum disruptors don't work, nothing will." She moved to a viewing window that looked out over the construction bays. Hundreds of ships were in various stages of completion, from skeleton frames to nearly finished vessels. Each one represented thousands of hours of work and resources that could have been used to improve human lives. "How many ships will we have? Ready for the first wave?" she asked. 2,000 destroyer-class vessels, 500 heavy cruisers, and 50 command ships, plus support vessels and fighters. And how many devourers are we facing? Chris was quiet for a moment. Latest intelligence suggests at least 800 of them, possibly more, each one the size of a small moon. Janet felt the weight of those numbers. Even with their new fleet, humanity would be outnumbered by creatures that had already proven they could destroy planets. Then we better make sure our ships work. Across the solar system, Admiral Tony Richards was overseeing the conversion of the asteroid belt into humanity's primary weapons factory. Massive mining ships tore chunks of rock from asteroids, feeding raw materials to processing plants that worked without stopping. Admiral, we're getting reports of equipment failures in Mining Section 7, reported Captain Susan Lee, his operations officer. What kind of failures? Overheating? Mechanical stress fractures? Worker exhaustion? Sir, we're pushing everything beyond safe operating limits. Admiral Richards looked out at the mining operation through the observation deck of his command ship. Robots and human workers labored side by side, extracting metals and rare elements needed for the war effort. How long can we maintain this pace? Maybe another month before we start seeing major breakdowns. After that, we'll have to slow down or risk losing entire mining operations. We don't have a month. The Devourers are moving faster than we expected. Latest reports show they'll reach human space in 8 days. Captain Lee checked her data pad. Sir, at current production rates, we'll have about 60% of our planned fleet ready by then. Then 60% will have to be enough. On Earth, Dr. Rachel Green was working on the most important project of her career. The quantum disruptor technology that might be humanity's only hope against the Devourers. Run the test again, she told her team of scientists and engineers. They activated the prototype weapon, aiming it at a block of neutronium, one of the densest materials known to science. The disruptor beam struck the target, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the neutronium began to dissolve, its atomic structure coming apart at the fundamental level. It works, whispered Dr. Ben Foster, one of Rachel's assistants. It actually works. Rachel felt a surge of hope, but she forced herself to stay focused. That's just a stationary target. We need to test it on something that can fight back. What do you suggest? We need a live devourer to test it on. And that means sending ships into combat before we know if our weapons will work. The thought made her stomach clench. Thousands of human lives would depend on weapons that existed only in theory just weeks ago. Meanwhile, Captain Maria Santos was leading the effort to train alien refugees as soldiers in the human fleet. The process was not going smoothly. The Zenthari keep trying to charge into battle without coordination, reported Lieutenant Ben Wilson, her training officer. Their entire military doctrine is based on individual combat, not fleet operations. Maria watched a group of Zenthari warriors practice using human weapons. Their 4 arms made them excellent gunners, but they had trouble following orders and working as a team. What about the Neptunians? Better at coordination, but they're used to 3-dimensional underwater combat. Space battles confuse them. And the Eldarians? They're the best at following orders, but they have no military experience at all. Most of them have never held a weapon in their lives. Maria sighed. She was trying to turn millions of refugees into a fighting force in a matter of weeks. It should have been impossible, but humanity needed every gun they could get. Keep working with them. We don't have the luxury of a long training period. The biggest challenge was not just training the aliens to fight, but getting them to trust human leadership. Many of the refugees still struggled with the fact that the primitive humans were now their commanders. Dr. Lisa Torres had made progress with the Genesis Protocol, but the results were mixed. On some worlds, the rapid terraforming process was working perfectly, creating habitable environments for refugees in weeks instead of years. On others, the ecological balance was fragile and unstable. Status report on the Genesis worlds, she called to her team. 12 successful transformations, 3 partial successes, and 2 complete failures, reported Commander Nick Johnson. The successful worlds can support about 3 million refugees each, and the failures? Total atmospheric collapse. We had to evacuate everyone before the air became toxic. Lisa looked at the data streaming across her screens. The Genesis Protocol was humanity's most advanced terraforming technology, but it was still experimental. Using it on such a massive scale was like performing surgery with a chainsaw. What's causing the failures? We're trying to compress millions of years of planetary development into weeks. Sometimes the process works, sometimes it doesn't. We can't predict which worlds will be stable. How many refugees are we still trying to house? 8 million and climbing. More refugee ships arrive every day. Lisa felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. Millions of beings depended on her team's ability to create new worlds for them to live on, and they were running out of time. Captain Eric Johnson was having his own problems with the human volunteers flooding into military service. The enthusiasm was impressive, but many of the recruits had no idea what they were signing up for. "Sir, we're getting a lot of requests from new recruits who want to transfer to non-combat positions," reported Lieutenant Amy Walsh. "What's the problem?" They're starting to understand what they're really facing. Videos from the destroyed worlds are circulating among the troops. Some of them are having second thoughts. Eric looked out over the training fields where thousands of young humans were learning to use weapons designed to fight creatures that could eat planets. Many of them looked scared, and he couldn't blame them. "What's our desertion rate?" "About 5% so far, but sir, that number is climbing. That number is... And the ones who are staying? They're getting better. The training programs are working. But Eric, most of these kids have never been in a real fight. When they faced the Devourers for the first time..." Eric nodded grimly. He had seen enough combat to know that training could only prepare someone so much. The real test would come when they faced an enemy unlike anything in human experience. As the week progressed, more reports came in from the front lines. The Devourers had consumed another 50 worlds, including several major alien capitals. The Zenthari Empire had lost its homeworld. The Quartz Collective was down to 3 surviving cities. Entire civilizations were becoming extinct in a matter of hours. President Carter received the daily briefings in his office, each one bringing worse news than the last. "Mr. President, we're running out of time," Admiral Hawkins reported. "The Devourers have changed their movement pattern. Instead of spreading out randomly, they're converging on human space. They know we're the only ones fighting back? It appears so. Intelligence suggests they can sense resistance, and they prioritize targets that might pose a threat." President Carter stood up and walked to his window. The city below bustled with activity as Earth prepared for war. Factories worked around the clock. Refugees filled temporary shelters, and transport ships carried supplies to the outer colonies. "How ready are we?" "The fleet is coming together faster than we hoped. Dr. Green's quantum disruptors are showing promise in testing. The refugee populations are being integrated into our forces. But, sir, we're still not ready for full-scale combat. We may not have a choice. Latest projections show the Devourers reaching our outer colonies in 5 days. Admiral Hawkins nodded. "I know, sir. Which means we're going to have to test our new weapons in actual combat. Against an enemy that has never been defeated." "Yes, sir." President Carter turned back to face his admiral. "Then we better hope that human stubbornness is enough to succeed where every other species has failed."